Hello and welcome to Cap Times Idea Fest, an annual event put on by the Cap Times that explores pressing issues facing Madisonians and Wisconsinites through discussions with researchers, newsmakers, and community leaders. I'm Danielle DuClos, the Cap Times investigative reporter, and I'll be moderating today's panel on how to keep Dane County's lakes clean. I'm joined by three incredible panelists: Hilary Dugan, who is an associate professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison Center for Limnology. There, she studies how climate change and land use patterns affect lakes. And we have Laura Hicklin, who is the director of the Dane County Land and Water Resource Department, where she works with farmers on conservation practices and provides lake management services on the Yahara chain of lakes. And James Tye, who is the executive director of Clean Lakes Alliance, which is a partnership of stakeholders working to preserve Dane County's lakes. So thank you all for being here. I'm really excited for today's discussion. We'll be exploring the challenges facing Dane County's lakes and the local work across sectors that's helping to protect these bodies of water. I'm going to kick off the discussion with you, Hilary, but as with any question on today's panel, everyone should feel free to chime in with their perspectives. So Hilary, Dane County's lakes are near and dear to the community and are an integral part of the region's culture, but they're not immune to the effects of pollutants or climate change. So what is impacting the lakes most, and how is that manifesting in our local waters?
Yeah, thanks, Danielle, for having me here today. Wisconsin lakes, just in general, are really treasured for recreations, for just general aesthetics, and of course aquatic ecology. Across the globe and here in Wisconsin, there's multiple stressors. We think a lot about nutrient pollution, invasive species, shoreline development, and as you said, the sort of accelerating impacts of climate change. Here in Dane County, our lakes are really strongly shaped by the water and the land that drain into them. And over the last 150 years, we've seen them transform from these clear water, sandy bottom lakes to now what we refer to as eutrophic lakes, or lakes that have basically too much algal biomass. So right now, most people would say that one of the biggest pressures is really nutrient pollution. So when we talk about nutrients, we're usually talking about nitrogen and phosphorus. Those drive algal growth. Essentially, they're plant food. So you add them to a lake, and you've created the conditions for this sort of explosive photosynthesis. And we've done a really good job managing kind of point source nutrient inputs into lakes. So you can think of that as like sewage inputs or industrial inputs. But it's been much harder to control sort of non-point sources. So things like fertilizer, manure application, soil erosion, all of these sort of deliver nutrients into the lakes. And then once the nutrients are there, we have algal blooms. And we're really concerned about these cyanobacterial blooms, or like blue-green algae, as some people call it, which create health risks. They close beaches, reduce water clarity. And then if you think about climate change, that's just sort of amplifying these issues. So, warmer air temperatures mean like longer summers, less ice cover. When we have bigger storms, that really intense rain is really good at sort of washing nutrients into the lake. And so that kind of climate change acceleration can sometimes sort of overwhelm existing sort of buffers and infrastructure we have in place to sort of prevent that. So in short, we have nutrient pollution that's degrading water quality, and then we have climate change sort of intensifying that. The result is we have oftentimes sort of poor water quality throughout our summers here.
Do either of you want to chime in on that question, or should we kick it off with James with the next one?
I want to add to that. I'm really grateful for Hilary and her team and the research they do. We're really lucky here in Dane County to have the University of Wisconsin. And when I think of this challenge, I'll just add that if we think about the lakes like as a person, right? And we have this extra nutrients coming in, so extra calories. Like we have as a society taken away the muscle mass, the organs, or in other words, like the wetlands and the upland buffers that would help our lakes deal with that excess of nutrients a little bit better. So there's no doubt that we've kind of overwhelmed the system with this nutrient loading that Hilary referenced. And regardless of how many wetlands we have, we'd probably still be challenged. But I really think it's important to stress that the loss of the wetlands and the upland buffers is really adding to the stress that our lakes are facing.
Yes, I love that analogy of thinking of them as people and they got too many calories. And so, James, this next question will start with you. With Clean Lakes Alliance, you put together an annual lake health report card called State of the Lakes. And so, how does the current health of the lakes compare to previous years? Are they getting better, worse? Where do they stand?
Talking about, thank you for inviting us. Before Clean Lakes Alliance, there actually was not a annual State of Lakes report. So that was one of the first things we did when we founded the organization 15 years ago. A lot of good work is being done, but a lot of times it's siloed. And so what the Clean Lakes Alliance does is bring all that information together. We partner with Dane County Land and Water, USGS, Liminology to put on that report. And we have mixed results. The good news is that the community signed off on our new community plan. And what that actually showed is that over the last 10 and 20 years, the concentration of phosphorus coming to our lakes has actually gone down. The problem is we get more rain events, right? So again, if you look at the calorie analogy, right? So we're still eating too many cheeseburgers. And now we're, the calorie maybe of the cheeseburger went down, but now we're eating too many of them, right? And so it's all about the quantity. So in a drought year, which we had the last couple of years, the lake's actually really dynamic. They can heal themselves pretty quickly. And when that phosphorus reduction has gone down, you're going to get really good water clarity. And so it's a mixed bag. We also had invasive species like Hilary was talking, and when those enter the system, it sort of disrupts the natural system of how the lake takes care of itself. So unfortunately, we have zebra mussels now, which is really good because they actually make the lake clear in the middle. So you might think that they're good, but it actually creates more shoreline algae due to changing how the dynamics of the lakes. So it's a mixed bag. Unfortunately, in some parts of the lake, it's more clear. And then some parts of the lake, they're going to have more algae. But it's the calorie intake. It's the amount of phosphorus that's going to lakes that creates the algae. So 1 pound of phosphorus can create 500 pounds of algae. The good news is all the practices that are going on, especially led by Laura and her team, are helping. We just have to do them at a faster pace. And that takes capacity, and that takes staffing, that means all the partners coming together, farming, business, the whole community. And we're going to need to supercharge those efforts, but it's going to have to be a community decision.
Do you want to hop in, Laura, and talk about how Dane County is working with local farmers to reduce phosphorus runoff and reduce that nutrient intake, maybe fewer cheeseburgers for the lakes?
Absolutely. So here in Dane County, we're fortunate. We have a county executive, Melissa Agard, and a county board that are really committed to supporting our farmers in this initiative. We're all part of this, challenge. Most of us are consuming dairy products here in Dane County, and so we want to support the farmers that are providing the food, the milk, the cheese that we're consuming. And we've learned over time that farmers learn best from each other. And so we have most recently partnered with the Natural Resource Conservation Service and the University of Wisconsin to establish Dane Demo Farms, which is a network of farmers that demonstrate and research conservation practices that improve water quality and soil health. So that's been very successful. If you're in kind of the water quality world, cover crops and farming is a really hot topic right now. Cover crops are a great way to reduce erosion, but the details on how to plant, manage, remove cover crops are unknown to a lot of farmers. And the Dane Demo Farms Network is a space where farmers can learn from each other on how to manage them. And we can also use Dane Demo Farms to conduct research on the finer points and details of how to manage the cover crops. So we're currently partnering with several local farmers to run trials at Dane Demo Farm fields so that these cover crops don't inadvertently add pests such as slugs to fields. And that's just one example of the research that we're conducting through Dane Demo Farms. It's a multi-year initiative, and we're also going to look at tillage, manure application methods, and other topics of research that include edge of field water quality monitoring so that we can all see how different practices impact soil and water runoff from fields. Another initiative we have is to provide cost share contracts to farmers to assist them in the transition to conservation practices. Farmers are often working on really slim margins, and it takes a lot of risk, which translates into financial risk to try some of the new practices that we're promoting. So we provide funding so farmers can learn how to plant cover crops. We have a program known as Soil Health Equipment program so that farmers can purchase new equipment that they need to start using these conservation practices. And we're helping them buy equipment such as low disturbance manure injection toolbars, compost turners, no-till drills, and traveling shade structures for grazing livestock. We also have a program known as Continuous Cover, where we provide significant funding to convert traditional row crop fields to continuous vegetative cover. So having living cover on a field year-round is one of the best ways to reduce runoff and erosion. And so we want to incentivize landowners, whether they be the landowner or the farmer. Those two aren't always one and the same. In Dane County, we have a lot of rural landowners that rent to farmers. And so we want to provide an incentive for them to participate in this program to increase water infiltration, reduce soil erosion, improve water quality, build soil health, increase wildlife habitat, sequester carbon, and diversify production practices. So farmers are using this program to install buffers along wetlands and surface water and to convert fields to grazing, which is another practice we'd like to see more of in Dane County. So that's been working really well. We also partner closely with our local farm-led watershed groups, such as Biological Farmer Friends, Farmers for the Upper Sugar River, and Yahara Pride Farms on demonstration events and workshops, where farmers are invited to spend an afternoon learning from each other and seeing new equipment being used firsthand. But the most important thing in all of these initiatives and programs are the relationships that we're building, right? So farmers learning from each other, and then our staff having the time to spend with farmers to learn what is stressing those farmers, how their systems work, and hopefully providing a suite of services to that farming operation so that they can learn how to stack these practices on one another. So our staff might spend time with the farmer and be able to help that farmer address any acute resource concerns. So for example, if they have manure running out of their barnyard, we can help fund the practices needed to correct that. We can layer that with cost share contracts for cover crops. We can hopefully help them purchase new equipment through the Soil Health Equipment Program, and we can get them involved in Dane Demo Farms so that they continue to learn and grow over time.
Yeah, wow. Dane County's doing a lot of great work on this issue. And I did want to go back, obviously, as people fully immersed in water quality and the health of Dane County's lakes, you know what cover crops are. But Laura, would you mind just explaining maybe to a viewer who is unfamiliar with what those are and how they help reduce phosphorus?
Yeah, that's a great question, and something that I talk to my staff about a lot are these concepts that we all take for granted, right? And then we go out and try to connect with the public, and people have no idea what we're talking about in terms of planting green or terminating a crop or whatever. And so a cover crop is an interim crop that a farmer is going to use in between their traditional production. And so if you have like a conventional, let's say, corn or soybean field that we all are familiar with as we drive around Dane County, after that crop is harvested, the farmer is going to plant a second and sometimes even third crop that's going to hopefully overwinter on that field so that, excuse me, we hopefully have living cover and establish roots in the soil year round. So having that cover really significantly reduces the erosion that's going to come off of that field. It improves or reduces soil compaction. It increases infiltration. It improves soil health. And so it's something that we and many agencies throughout the country are really promoting heavily as something that we want to see most of our farmers aspiring to.
Thank you so much for that. And Hilary, we're going to go back to you. So we've talked about agriculture already quite a bit and how it's a contributor to phosphorus in the lakes, but there are other pollutants making their way into lakes from urban settings. And Hilary, you've been vocal in the past about how excessive road salt is a concern. So how does that disrupt a lake's ecology, and what's being done to combat Madison having salty waters?
Yeah, I definitely spent a lot of my research time studying the impacts of road salt on lakes. And it's definitely one of the less kind of visible pollutants, but it is a growing threat to Madison's lakes. So when salt is spread on roads in the winter, it doesn't just vanish, like no one's going out and picking it up. So all that salt that we see being put down washes into our storm sewers, into our streams, and ultimately accumulates in the lakes. Salt is really soluble, so it just dissolves in water. And when it does that, it increases the salinity of water. So most of us are, familiar with like fresh water versus the ocean. But there's this whole sort of continuum as, you keep adding salt, water kind of just gets saltier. So ecologically, this presents a few problems. A big one is that, all of our native Wisconsin species are adapted to like really fresh water. This isn't a state that sort of naturally had salty ecosystems. So that elevated salinity, at worst can be toxic to aquatic species, especially to sort of the small ones like aquatic invertebrates, which form the base of food webs. Then you also just see sort of shifts in community composition towards more kind of salt tolerant species. And critically, that shift might favor invasive species that tend to be sort of more generalists, more kind of tolerant of saltier conditions. And then from like a physics point of view, salt also makes water denser. And this is really important because lakes, they mix annually because of water density. There's pretty interesting dynamics that go on in lakes throughout the year. And so as you add salt, you get denser water, and that can actually kind of reduce that mixing dynamic. And so we're actually seeing that happening a little bit in our Madison lakes in the springtime. They just kind of accumulate all this salt over winter. And then, we don't use the Madison lakes for drinking water, but it is a pretty pressing issue, is just the salinization of kind of both surface water and groundwater drinking water supplies. So again, cognizant that the salt we put on roads is going into our water supplies, and that can be really economically harmful when it comes to what the effect that might have on drinking water infrastructure. So in some ways, salt is a easier pollutant to deal with than kind of the nutrient problems we were talking about earlier. And that's because salt should just wash downstream. With nutrients, there's sort of more biology at play in their cycling, and so the nutrients kind of stick around in systems longer. So with salts, it's a really simple solution. We just have to stop putting so much on our landscapes. If we slow down the input, we will see improvement. And so in my opinion, the city of Madison, I think, has been really great and at the forefront of recognizing this issue. And they've been really successful as a municipality in reducing salt use. They track their annual salt use numbers, and we've seen those go down significantly. And this is through just like better decision making, more efficient technology. And then we're also seeing the switch from solid rock salt to liquid brine. And all of these have shown sort of tremendous potential to reduce salt use. And with that comes actually a lot of cost savings because you're like not buying as much salt. So that's been great. There's also Wisconsin Saltwise, who has been really amazing at training municipalities and private applicators in how to reduce salt use without compromising safety. That said, I don't know, the city of Madison's been great in reducing salt, but the lakes here are affected by kind of, all of the land that drains into them. And so what we see is that, there's lots of municipalities, there's counties, there's private applicators that all, put down salt every winter. And so it's a real challenge, I guess, in some ways, to kind of shift that collective understanding that salt is a pollutant into then kind of the action, which is reducing salt use. So I think, we're really at this point where we kind of have to accept that in order to have like fresher water, in order to retain the fresh water resources that we have. We're probably just gonna have to accept that our, winter commute times might be a little bit slower as we move from, these policies in the past where it was like bare pavement all winter to, the reality that we can maintain safety, but we might have to just like scale back our salt use.
Yeah, it's really encouraging having this conversation because I feel like a lot of environmental topics can get very doom and gloom, but it's been great to hear from all of you about like active solutions. You guys know what the solutions are. It just needs to be ramped up and implemented and it at full scale. Yeah. So it's encouraging to hear.
And I had one more thing that just like the climate change sort of accelerates some of the nutrient problems. Climate change is also layering on top of the salt problem, which is, our salt use is weather dependent. And so we've now had, at least in Dane County, 2 winters in a row that had really low snowfall. And so that should mean really low salt use. And so again, as we have shifting climate, especially shifting winters here in Wisconsin, we're likely going to see an impact of that on salt as a pollutant as well.
Okay, yeah, climate change is not great, and maybe winter's not great, but it's that's I guess one positive thing to take out of that. So we've been talking about the environmental influence and impacts on the lakes, but they also have significant economic impact in the region. And James, your organization recently commissioned a study looking at that. So what did the study find about how the lakes affect the local economy and property values?
Yeah, so unfortunately, sometimes it takes talking about money to move the dial and how it affects everybody's pocketbook and municipality pocketbooks. Because there's no question that our lakes you really can't put a number on it, right? I mean, we are the lakes, and how the lakes go, so will our community. And it's really sort of interesting. When we started the Clean Lakes Alliance, somebody actually said, "It's not your job, James, to clean up the lakes." I'm like, well, that's a really odd thing to say. It's your job to get everybody else to want to do it. So for some people, it's all about the dollar. So we actually found out that the lakes provide over $220 million every year into economic value into the community. And on top of that, it's actually the beaches that can really change our community. They're a big economic driver, and the beach being open or closed can add $1 million or subtract $1 million to our local economy per day. This was a scientific study done by 2 universities. So it is really important. The other thing is that it's jobs. If the lakes were a business, it'd be the 8th largest employer in Dane County. Over 1,800 jobs are 100% connected back to the lakes. You can think of all the different people. If a restaurant is on the lakes, that's each one of those people is actually not an employee of the lakes. Only a fraction of their work is because they're on the lakes. And so it was a really careful study. So, however our lakes are reacting, it's going to make and break the community. And while I love libraries and all these other wonderful things, our first investment really should be our water, because whether it's our drinking water, our water in our lakes, it's all one water and it's all connected. But they are a huge economic driver. Talking about the university, everybody sells the university because it's on the lakes. Everybody sells Madison. Every time we get rated in the top 10, they normally mention lakes. And so our really goal is to raise the awareness that what we're doing as a collective community works, but we need to do more of it at a faster pace. I mean, Clean Lakes Alliance, we're talking about, the farm groups, the county and the Clean Lakes Alliance actually founded Yard Pride Farms over 15 years ago. We've put in over $1 million into that one organization itself to do those practices and to, give them a little bit of support. The county's done a lot of work and expanding their network and actually nurturing other farm groups. But it is all one community. And while we love everything in our community, there's actually been surveys done about satisfaction rate and importance by the city of Madison and past mayors. And guess what? Lakes are more important than a lot of things on that list, including libraries, other municipal type things, but the satisfaction rate for lakes is the lowest. So while we prioritize it higher than some other city and government municipalities, is actually pretty low. And also what Hilary was talking about, there are over 20 municipalities in the Yahara watershed. So that's one of the things that we're really excited about. The county executive, along with the Clean Lakes Alliance, has started a Renew the Blue Council to bring more government entities under one body, along with nonprofits as an arm of the Clean Lakes Alliance to really amplify the work that's being done already so people can understand that, but then hopefully get the resources to do more good work.
Yeah, wow. The amount of jobs, like all of that being broken down, it really puts into perspective. As you said, people shouldn't really need a dollar sign, but sometimes the numbers are helpful for folks.
It's over $35 million in direct tax benefit too.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so speaking of all of the partners and people working to protect and improve the lakes, Dane County is one of the partners leading the efforts to restore over 150 acres of former dairy farmland and expand the Pheasant Branch Conservancy. So Laura, what has work on that restoration project looked like so far, and how will it help the health of the lakes?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question and a great example of work that the county and our partners are doing throughout the county, right? So we're going to talk today about Pheasant Branch Conservancy, but I want us to think about that as an example of work that's happening throughout the watershed and needs to happen. So that's a really nice one to highlight because it is located in a very specific part of the watershed that makes activities on that property. The lakes are really vulnerable to what happens on that property. So in 2019, the property went for sale. The county made the decision to purchase it, and we made that decision for several reasons. It was an incredibly expensive purchase, but we knew it was adjacent to existing public lands, and that's really important because we know that people, plants, animals all benefit from having larger tracts of protected land. As I mentioned, its location in the watershed is really important, and our lakes are more vulnerable to flooding and nutrient loading depending on how that property is managed. So keeping it in agriculture or developing it, as many people wanted to see happen, was going to send an additional 2.6 million gallons of water to our lakes annually and nearly 600 pounds of phosphorus into our lakes annually. But by making the decision to purchase it and to restore the wetlands and prairie on the site, we've avoided that from happening. Maybe somewhat counterintuitively, protecting that property actually helps keep agriculture in Dane County more sustainable. So Pheasant Branch Conservancy is located kind of in the city of Middleton into the towns, and it serves as a buffer between our more suburban and urban environments and the agricultural lands to the north. And we found over time that having that transition of public open space between developed and agricultural lands is actually very helpful for our agricultural producers. We know that we have challenges in agriculture, but we also know that we want agriculture to be viable here in Dane County and in the long run. And we see conflicts when we have a new subdivision go in right next to an existing working farm. So having these public lands transition the land use can be very helpful. So we made the purchase, and then we were grateful to have a wonderful partnership with the Clean Lakes Alliance and the Friends of Pheasant Branch Conservancy to make that restoration complete. So buying the land is the first step, and then restoring the property comes next. So we spent several years doing demolition of the existing farmstead and buildings. And again, when this farm was developed like over 100 years ago, it might have made sense as a farm, but where it's located, it no longer made sense to keep this particular parcel in agriculture. So we were able to remove the buildings. We did a comprehensive wetland restoration, and then worked with the Clean Lakes Alliance, the Friends, and community partners to complete a multi-year, what we're calling Platinum Prairie restoration. So we wanted to make sure that the prairie that was restored was particularly diverse. So we have over 75 plant species located in this prairie. That's going to add to biodiversity. It's going to serve as a seed bank for other restoration projects. And we're also using the site now as long-term monitoring so that we can have better data for the community to understand the value in these restoration projects. I think we all inherently know that restoration is a good thing, but we don't always have the data to help make that argument that much more solid. So we are doing long-term monitoring to see what those benefits will be, and we're really excited to see that data over the long term.
Great. James, did you want to chime in at all about Clean Lakes Alliance works on that as well?
Yeah, I think it's really important when you're doing these large scale projects is to get the community involved. I mean, it's one thing you could just, I think it was very smart for Laura to involve the two nonprofits and get involved, because those memories of those people planting the seeds and doing it every year, we did a different quadrant of the farm. And you can actually go to the top if people are watching, like sometime go out to Pheasant Branch, go to the top of Fredericks Hill and look northwest, and you can actually see the different quadrants of what was the farm, because they're in different stages of coming back. So besides the $100,000 that were raised and given by both organizations, we participated and coordinated putting down the seed in the frost period in March. But also, I think it was Laura's vision really to create this Platinum Prairie. So now seed's really expensive. And so we actually we do a volunteer day every Thursday from Earth Day all the way until things freeze in October, and getting those people out there collecting those seeds and then using them elsewhere in Dane County is both a savings for the community, but also getting people involved, because a lot of times I'll stand in a room and I'm talking to a group of people, and we'll have people raise their hands if their parents or if they grew up on a farm, usually almost nobody. And then if you ask, did your parents, a few more, if you ask how many people's grandparents, and almost everybody raises their hand. And so that disconnect over time, where we become a more urbanized society, is not a good thing, because we need to be in touch with our land, because everything that ends up in the lands can end up in the lakes. And so really thankful for Dane County realizing the importance of volunteerism and really nurturing that to let more people get involved.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you outlining that, because it leads great into the next question, which, Hilary, this will go to you. And so obviously there's volunteers, community members, academia, nonprofits like Clean Lakes Alliance, and government like Dane County and the city of Madison, all working on different aspects of trying to help protect and keep the lakes clean. And so how does that collaborative approach to address the complex issue of keeping the lakes clean and healthy, how does that work, and how is that beneficial?
Yeah, I think hopefully we've made it clear that these issues are pretty complex, and too complex for any one group to kind of just solve by themselves. So collaboration is definitely essential, and we're very fortunate here in Dane County to have just so many people who care about these lakes. And so we have nonprofits, we have, university researchers, we have state, local, municipal agencies, community organizations, just citizens who want to be involved. And all of those people bring different strengths, from, research and monitoring to James Tye Lake restoration, to more on the policy making side, and just general outreach, right? Just getting people informed. And so there's, I think you've already heard about examples of how people collaborate here, on the lakes. For us, one good example is, we go out like on the lakes, pretty frequently and collect water samples. We're the only organization here that actually kind of goes out into the middle and collects water. And so, if we're going to be out there doing that, we want to make the most of it. And so we send some of that water to the county, who pays for some of the water analyses, that then James's organization will take and use in the State of the Lakes report. And so, to get that one phosphorus number from the middle of the lake has already involved like the university, it's involved the county, it's involved Clean Lakes Alliance. And so, that's just one example of how we work together to sort of produce knowledge, I guess, if you will. And, I think the other thing is that we just had a lot of history of studying the lakes here in Madison. We pride ourselves on being the birthplace of limnology. So we've had people studying Mendota for, over a century. And, over that time, things have changed a lot. But we just have a lot of kind of knowledge that goes back a long ways that we're still using. And there's lots of people who have been involved here for a long time on collaborative projects. And it's exciting because there's always new people who want to get involved too. So, yeah, hope that answers that.
Yeah, definitely. Did anyone else want to chime in on that one?
Yeah, I think it's, I think the community has come together 3 times in recent history to bring together the updated community plan, right? The last time was in 2022. It's called Renew the Blue, and it really points out the direct things that we can do to improve our water quality, and then the indirect. The 2 things that came out that are the biggest threats are phosphorus and then E. coli. And the E. coli is sort of like the mystery thing, right? So the water might be completely clear, but have E. coli in it. And that's going to be really important. Not just testing if there is E. coli there, but we should be going one step further and find out, with another simple test, you can find out if it's human, bird, or mammal. And so we're going to be exploring how to do that on a more rapid basis to not just figure out if the beach should be closed or not, like a city Madison beach, but also like what is the issue, and then tracing that and trying to fix the problem. We've had a great community discussion about, taking care of the phosphate problem. Laura and her team, plus a whole bunch of other people, have made progress on the land. All those practices that Laura was talking about, they were not as readily available in our community 10 and 20 years ago. But it does take a community. The Clean Lakes Alliance, one of the things that we are alliance, right? So we have small nonprofits, large nonprofits, corporations, all sorts of people coming together. And that always needs to be expanded. Whether you're joining a local friends group in your neighborhood, a neighborhood group, you're getting active on through a committee with your local municipality, really it's going to take a large community conversation and push to make the type of impacts that we need because of the changing climate. Getting these really heavy downpours in a short period of time, it's not helping us.
Yeah, and you mentioned, right, E. coli closing beaches. And so obviously one of the major ways that residents are interacting with the lakes is by swimming, paddleboarding, boating on them, getting out there and enjoying the water. And so how can residents who are skeptical about the safety of recreating on the lakes boost their confidence on where and when it's safe to swim? And James, we can start with you on that one.
That's a big question. So for me, I'm fortunate to actually be from Madison, and so I had the privilege of going to, Spring Harbor and things like that. You should always check to see if the beach is open or closed. Also advocate for the beaches to be tested on a more regular basis. Right now, our beaches are tested on Mondays and Tuesdays. If the beach is found closed, they will then continue to test that beach Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But we are encouraging maybe testing more frequently, building partnerships, finding resources and grants to support that effort. We know that our municipalities, just like all of us, are having financial restraints. But I think E. coli you can't see. And so it's going to be really important to find out where that E. coli is coming from. I happen to live on the west side of Madison. A house was built in 1964. And, it is one water. And we had the Roto-Rooter, our lateral, which goes from the house to the stormwater, the sewer water pipe, and it had roots growing it. So if roots are going in, something else is going out. And I think, finding out where the E. coli is coming from at the beaches, but also just improving the overall confidence in our one water policy. And that's going to be really important in the decades ahead as we are projected to double the population. And what is that going to mean for our community?
Mhm.
Yeah. Laura, do you want to just
chime in on the confidence angle too? I think what's interesting too is that, you'll have a lot of people who will tell you that, they used to swim in the lakes growing up and now they can't. But you also have the opposite where people are like, no, the lakes used to be, have poor water quality. And, the reality is that I think we all think that this is like a really kind of like modern problem. But it's like we've had poor water quality for a long time in these lakes, and they are not the worst that they've ever been. They've improved a lot in a lot of ways. And so, I want people to know that. It's interesting, I teach limnology every fall, and I ask students about, historic water quality, and everyone thinks that now is the worst it's ever been. And, the Clean Water Act was a long time ago, but it's definitely not. We've improved a lot of things. And so I think, people should have confidence in our water resources. I think now we just have a lot more awareness and a lot more monitoring. And it's challenging because there are problems like cyanobacteria where you can't see a toxin. You have to actually do a lab test. And so there's always algae in our lakes, but a lot of that algae is good. It's the base of the food chain. The problem is when we have sort of excessive algae. And so, as James said, I think it comes down to like monitoring, which then instills confidence. So you can actually see a number, you can feel confident in that number. And, I think, Madison's the type of community that really like should get behind that, because there's lots of people here who use those resources. And so, the cost of one lab test divided over all the people using the lakes, really comes down to not a lot of resources.
I think one of the other things that, talking about more people having more data, that's really important. That's one of the reasons I think Clean Lakes Alliance is being able to grow as organizations, because people really care and they want more information. And, before we didn't have really any citizen monitoring. It was the UW was, doing a couple lakes on their own schedule. And there may be like one or two sort of infrequent monitors. Now we have a network of 84 different sites by over 100 monitors. So they're going there on a weekly basis. So now you can imagine they're getting their own data. They can look at their own data. They're telling their spouse, they're going to the hardware store. They've got their own data to say, hey, the lakes, my spot was either had more algae than last year or this year. And they have their own real data to share themselves, and empowering and engaging the public. And now it's time to activate it, like activate our community to want to do more.
Yeah, and I really want to echo Hilary's comments about not letting that activation be driven by fear, because I think there is a lot to celebrate. And even, the volunteer data collectors that James has gathered, like that's a great example of action. And when you take that action, you're building momentum, you're conquering your fear. A lot of the complaints we get here at the county are more about the near shore conditions and the literal garbage that people are finding in the lake. So all the salt that Hilary mentioned earlier, the garbage is also just flowing directly into our lake. So when it rains and we have outfalls that drain directly to our lakes from our streets, we're picking up a lot of garbage. And I really encourage people to, it's as simple as on your own or through an organized event that Clean Lakes Alliance and others sponsor, like just literally getting out, putting gloves on, and collecting some of that garbage can feel really good. You spend time outside and you conquer your fear and you start to realize like it's not actually that scary to be out here. I really enjoyed myself. I spent time outdoors. I feel better about it. And now I've created some momentum that's hopefully going to build other behavior changes that are going to benefit our lakes.
Going back to what Hilary said about, we've really made a lot of progress and with the reporting work that's been done. But Hilary, you might want to mention, because I've been telling people about it on May 28th, Limnology reported 11 meters of clarity in the middle of Lake Mendota. And I believe that's over 30 feet of clarity. I'm not sure if you're aware of that monitoring that happened, but from what I understand, it was a historic high for clarity in Mendota.
Yeah. Mendota, I mean, our lakes are fascinating. They have really kind of massive swings in their water quality throughout the season. And we often see sort of this clear water in the spring, but this year, as James, as you said, it was a kind of off the charts. So, I mean, we've recorded clarity that high before, but it's been rare. And, it's amazing to see. And one of the challenges is like people aren't out in May staring at the bottom of the lake, but they should be, because this year was incredible. You could see out so far into the bottom. And that's an effect of biology. And so, if, as someone said earlier, the lakes can heal themselves, and, biology can do that. Biology can clear up the water. And so if we, can try and reduce some of these nutrient inputs, we will see clear water like that. And honestly, the last few years have been like pretty good. I'm fortunate to work beside the lake every day. And so I see Lake Mendota water quality all year. We haven't seen some of the like historically bad bloom years. And so, definitely encouraging.
Yeah, and it's been great to hear about all the prevention efforts that are going on across sectors. But there's also work being done to remove some of the nutrients that are already there. So Laura, could you talk a little bit about the county's work on that, maybe the legacy sediment removal projects and the impact that those have been having?
Yeah, absolutely. So legacy sediment removal, also known as Suck the Muck, is a collaboration led by Dane County, but absolutely would not be possible without support from the University of Wisconsin and from the Wisconsin DNR, and Clean Lakes Alliance, where we recognize that some of the tools and knowledge that we have today didn't exist 50 years ago. And so farming practices then, other land uses, contributed to a lot of soil erosion that landed in our lakes. Those soils came with a lot of phosphorus, and that phosphorus has been in our stream bottoms now for decades, and it's slowly been dissolving and releasing into the streams that feed the Yahara chain of lakes. So we're continuing to see phosphorus inputs from this legacy sediment as it's known. So we have been systematically working throughout the watershed to, one, address all of the upland practices to make sure that today's farming practices aren't contributing to tomorrow's legacy sediment, but we're also going back and removing that sediment from our streams. So we have completed work on several streams that feed into the Yahara chain, including Dorn Creek, Token Creek, 6 Mile Creek. We're currently wrapping up a massive restoration of Dorn Creek north of Lake Kaganza, and we to date have removed over 200,000 pounds of phosphorus that we're feeding into the lakes. And when we do that, we're also at the same time reconnecting our streams to the adjoining floodplain. We're re-meandering the streams where possible, and we're improving habitat. So it's been very successful. It's been well received by the community, and I think it's a really good example how large scale efforts can have a very dramatic impact.
And really just excited about that. But one of the things that was also brought up years ago is that with these large rain events, you've got a pretty good, I mean, you could have 2, 3, 4 feet of muck right in these streams. And we were also worried about the blowout event. So what would happen if you'd get a large rain event and that sediment really quickly would all enter the lake at once, where it was dripping like a little bit phosphorus or a lot of phosphorus. But we were also really worried, and came up in one of our committee meetings by Dick Lathrop, like what would happen if you get a quick rain event and you would just flush all that legacy sediment out. So Suck the Muck has been very successful, and it's not an easy job. Laura would say, I think they've done an amazing job also trying to contain the cost of it by bringing it in-house. They first were using an outside vendor, but realized that they could probably do it better and on a better basis by bringing it in-house. So really congratulate Laura and her team for finding out how we can also save money by doing some of these large-scale projects.
Yeah, it's a community effort, and we've been really lucky to have the community support in this investment. And it doesn't prevent these large events from happening, right? Like a few years from now, we might be at, Cap Times Idea Fest 2032, and we'll just have had another flood event or some other catastrophe. So we know these things are going to continue to happen. But the goal, in addition to removing that legacy sediment, is to make our natural environment more resilient to these pressures that we know we're facing. So can we give nature enough room through protecting land and restoring it that it can actually do its job when it's put under stress? And it's thanks to the fact that the county and others have invested in the Dane County Park system that we were actually able to move ahead with legacy sediment and also Yahara River sediment removal. If we did not have a robust network of public lands that we've all invested in over the last 30 years, it would not have been feasible to move ahead with this initiative. So I really want to put a plug in for Dane County Parks, City of Madison Parks, all of the parks owned and open spaces owned by other municipalities, by our nonprofit partners such as Groundswell Conservancy. Those protected lands are able to work for all of us and make us more resilient to the flood events we know were coming, and to help clean the water that runs off the landscape when we have these heavy rains.
And I think that's a good point, Laura. I think one of the things that as a community we're working on is how to, as we grow as a community, as we do more infill and more people move here, more companies move here, is how to do development smartly, right? So we want our community to grow, but we have to do it in a way that also protects our natural resources and the attributes of the community that we like. And so as more people move here, we want to also think about, we might have to change how we develop those lands, those communities, those stormwater ponds, and also even more protect those special places like wetlands and marginal areas that really do provide, they're the lungs of the lake, right? So I love Laura's analogy before, is those things are really important to prioritize future development rights, or to protect those special places now into the future.
Yeah, and we have time for about one more question, and I want to leave viewers with kind of maybe some action items that they could take as a Dane County resident. So we'll start with you, James. What are some ways that the average Dane County Madisonian can help keep the lakes clean?
Well, the first thing is, remember, everything that goes on the land can end up in the lakes, and it's a one water system. So leaves in the fall, there's right around the corner. It's the biggest urban contributor to phosphorus. As if you're pulling out of your driveway or your apartment, think about ways to encourage your family members, your landlord to remove those leaves from the street. It's like a tea bag effect. So you can imagine the water goes through, it pull those tannins out, in this case phosphorus, and they go into the lakes. That's also everything that you put on land of the lakes, which talks about salt. Building rain gardens, everything that you can do to reduce runoff to the lakes is going to help with water quality and also water quantity as we look at that problem. But it is going to take a full effort because still 70% of the phosphorus is coming from agriculture. And we're going to have to work with our agricultural partners to re-sculpt the land to protect the land and the lakes, which is going to be a heavy lift. And I love my cheese curds. I love my ice cream. But I also love my lakes. And so I think it's important to everybody listening to really, and even like saying your neighbor, can you go to your neighbor and help them maybe take the leaves out of the curb and gutter? So get out there and rake, burn some calories.
Yeah, it's a great message for as the leaves are starting to turn right now and fall is approaching. Hilary or Laura, do you have any final thoughts for us?
I would echo James's comment and add that we do all play a role. So when we hear like agriculture is a big contributor, it doesn't absolve the rest of us from a responsibility. So support the local programs that support farmers, and then think about what you can do at your house. James had some great examples with leaves. We offer really heavily discounted native plants for people that want to plant rain gardens and plant native plants in their homes. And we also offer workshops for people to learn how to design a rain garden for their home. So that's a really easy, actionable, low-cost option for people that want to take action.
Yeah, I think James and Laura covered there's lots of ways if you're a residential homeowner to play your part. It's the first day of the semester here on campus, so I will say that there's also a lot of continuing education. And every fall semester we get a lot of just residents in the community, senior auditing our courses. There's lots of ways to keep learning about lakes. And those can be from small workshops to auditing a university course. But just get out there and you can keep learning about our wonderful lakes that we have here in Wisconsin.
And I would not be a good nonprofit leader if I didn't say donate. You can actually donate directly to Conserve an Acre. So that money will go to a agriculture person to do a practice over the winter, or you can donate directly to See the Need, and that will go directly to conservation efforts to do more prairies and work on wetlands. So you can go to cleanlakesalliance.org/donate, and you can direct funds directly to a program like monitoring also. Because we also know the federal government is putting pressures on work such as Hilary is doing, and some of our monitoring is going to need some local support in the near future.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for your time today and your insights. And thank you to everyone who watched. You can learn more about IdeaFest at captimesideafest.com and support local journalism like this. You can become a Cap Times member at captimes.com.